you bear it all. You know what I mean? For a man to bear all the woman's temper and to take on the responsibility of taking care of your 2 young children and to still find, to manage it financially, it's not easy. I always say this, I say everybody likes to interview me or talk about me. I think people should interview him.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of Wise and Shine. I'm your host, SG Budget Babe, and today we have a new host replacing Reggie for good. I'm kidding, he's just right over there. We have Alex. Some of you might recognize Alex from some of our previous episodes, but Alex, over to you.
Hi, I'm Alex Low, and you can find me on @AlexLow_growth mindset coach.
And today we have a really interesting guest on set. Her name is Cassandra Nadira Lee, and she has overcome a lot of adversity in her own life, including a period of not being able to see anything. And when I say see, I mean it quite literally, like blind, So we'll talk about her story and how she overcame it, the strategies used, and how you guys can learn from experience. But in the meantime, I'm going to pass the mic over to Cassandra to introduce herself. So Cassandra, tell us about yourself and what do you do?
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Cassandra Nadira Lee. I'm a team dynamics coach and I have my own company called COM, Connecting Mind and Body. You can find me on LinkedIn under Cassandra Nadira Lee. So what I really do is to help people work better together by formulating what's not working for them through their dynamics. So that's what I do.
Does it include relationship dynamics?
Relationship in the workplace.
Okay.
Private relationship, personal, no.
Got it. Okay, so but before we go into that, I want to talk a little bit about your personal story, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So we're reading about how, you were pregnant, you gave birth, and when you opened your eyes, you could not see your newborn.
Yep.
And that was like for 1.5 years, right?
Yep.
And then you shared also that because of the medications that you were on, you couldn't breastfeed. So there were a lot of hindrances to your journey. Was that your first or second kid? How did that come about? Could you walk us through the experience?
Sure. It was my second child. It was Gadia. Because I had Rehan, which is our first child 2 years ago, I was perfectly healthy. The pregnancy was a breeze. Rehan came out, healthy. I was actually breastfeeding Rehan for 11 months straight. He doesn't even need water. So that's how healthy I was. So, and we went back to the same gynae naturally, right? Because he helped us through all this. But when I had my second pregnancy, I started feeling quite different. I felt a little bit weaker, but not that much. Maybe I thought it was because, my first child was barely 2 years old, terrible too. I was taking care of him and I got pregnant. Nothing very unusual went on till 6 months into the pregnancy and I started just feeling different. Then at 33 weeks, I went into labor.
Oh, that's quite early.
Yes.
So it's a preemie
Yes,
lah. Yeah.
it's a preemie. And it was intensive pain. It was not like, because I already gave birth the first time, I know what labor pain is about. It's just different. And when I went into labor, I didn't know at the point in time, but my liver contracted because of the condition that the gynae did not find out, which is severe eclampsia. So after everything, when I did research, when you had severe eclampsia, the only remedy is that you must take some sort of a medicine from the moment you're pregnant all the way till you give birth.
From the moment you're pregnant?
Yes.
Like at
Or the
8 weeks when you discover?
Yes.
But if you don't know you have the condition?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, most women would not know until you discover. So, but I didn't have that because I was not diagnosed. So,
And there were no warning signs either, right? Aside from the lethargy, which honestly I think every second-time mom with a kid under 3 would attest to. So it's hard to gauge.
Exactly. So it was, but what was scary, really, that moment till now, as I speak to you, I can still remember is, woman after they give birth, you're tired. You sleep, right? I woke up and I really thought they were playing a trick on me because I could hear my husband, I could hear my close friends in the room and they were chit-chatting, da. And I opened my eyes and it was pitch black. Like, and I was like, hey, don't play a fool, switch on the lights. And then they're like, I was like, the lights are on. I was like, okay. And immediately they knew something was wrong. And my husband went to call the gynae, and then they quickly put in the eye specialist, and they said, I think it's blindness. And at the point in time, because it's that instant, right? They didn't know. They didn't know what causes it because it was not diagnosed as severe eclampsia.
So at that point, they didn't yet know that you had eclampsia.
It's quite bad, right?
Yeah.
It's really quite bad. It's really, really quite bad. Then after that, everything went through like blur. But what I find really was very painful was because they immediately put me on steroids because they said to further, we don't know what's going to happen after. It could be other senses or whatever. They said immediately I have to put you on steroid. And as I said, my son was born 33, coming to 34 weeks. He was a premature. He was 1.865 kg.
Wow. Okay.
You know, like a kitten.
Yes.
And because my first child, not that big, Rehan was 2.3. But, you know, I couldn't see, but I could tell, right? And so it was very, very tough. He was in NICU. We couldn't bring him home. By the third, fourth day, the doctor said I could go home. I couldn't see.
How long did it take for you to even get some sort of answers to what was happening? Because you said it wasn't diagnosed even up to that point, right? So when you went home, you had no reason for the blindness. Doctor said, we don't know, we're going to let you know as soon as we know.
Yeah. So
How
the
long
test
was
was
that?
only after. So after that, I went back to see the eye specialist. So they did the test. Then after that, I think it was almost 2 to 3 weeks later.
So you had to wait 2 to 3 weeks before you even knew what was happening to your body.
Yes.
Let's talk about that period. It must have been, I can imagine, like if you go to sleep, you just wake up the next day, you can't see anything, your loved ones, especially a newborn baby. There's so much emotions and processing going on. And on top of that, to not have any answers makes it even more frustrating. How did you deal with that?
I think there was just so much going on that I didn't know how to deal with. But I think on top of the mind is these two children that is my responsibility. And to care for them the best way I can was the top of mind. And I had my mom who was with me, and I have a helper. And my mom was quite old by then. I could only have her come during the day to help us to take care of me and the two children. But I need to let her go home so that she can rest at night. And what was very difficult was, I don't know, it's an Asian thing or it's my brother. I want to make sure she can go home. I want to make sure she doesn't worry about me. So there's that. I wouldn't say it's a pretendance, but it's like I have to act strong so that
Yeah.
she can go home in peace, and I cannot have her worry about me. And I know she worries, right? I mean, can you imagine? She'll be saying, "Oh my God, I raised my daughter and she was healthy and she was, going to have my grandchildren. Suddenly all this happened." So I did not want to add to my mom's and my dad's burden. So I was trying to be very strong. And I think what also didn't help was that it was 2009. It was a global financial crisis, right? My husband quit his job just before I gave birth.
Right before that whole incident happened.
Yes.
Wow. So right before the whole ordeal happened, you were pregnant. It was not meant to be that you gave birth so soon. It came very unexpectedly. The blindness also probably set you guys back because number one, you're kind of like crippled in a ways, right? One sense, what your sight gone. You probably have to make a lot of adjustments in your life. You didn't have any answers for at least 2 to 3 weeks, almost a whole month. And on top of that, there was that financial insecurity because your husband left his job. How did you manage that? Was finances a big problem, or because of this, did your husband then have to go off and get a new job right away so that you all could account for the change in living arrangements?
So on the top of our mind is we need to get financial stable, or else all of us would be in some sort of a crisis, right? But because it's financial crisis, he couldn't find a job in Singapore, so he took on a job in Saudi Arabia. So as Muslim, we practice 28 days of confinement. So we closed the confinement on 28th day, 29th day. On the 29th day, he flew
flew
to
off.
Saudi
But you were left in Singapore.
because they couldn't move me, right? And it's a new environment for
And
him.
at that time, you were
Yeah.
still blind. So who then cared for you? Share with us a bit of like your day to day, right? Because
Yeah.
if you're freshly blind, you wouldn't know, how to move around, how to brush your teeth, how to put on your clothes.
Yep.
And on top of that, you had to care for your two plus
babies.
3-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And the newborn was already home or still in
Yeah, so
hospital?
after 1 week, he came home.
Okay.
So after 1 week, he came home. So how it looked like was really very much the helper was taking care of the basic stuff. Then my mom would come early morning and then she would help us through. And what really matters for us was the two boys' health, especially the newborn because he was premature. Right, so the doctor say he has to go on formula, blah 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 blah, and we were like, okay, what type of formula? And as you know, right, newborn, they can't take every type of formula. You have to go
Yeah,
through
you have to
trial and error
test.
whether he has allergy,
Which
blah blah
brand
blah.
works best?
And because I couldn't see, so everything was reliant on the helper and my mom. And alhamdulillah, thank God that time the helper was quite stable. She was a mom to 4 kids at home in Philippines, so she was quite solid and stable. So thank God we had her. And she was really compassionate, so she would always tell mom, don't worry, I'll be here. So there was a lot of assurance, but I didn't know, I can't tell, but my mom said I had a lot of blue blacks because I keep knocking into things, right? And so they try to soften everything with sponge and everything.
The child safety things that we would buy, right?
I think the one of the most painful night till today I remember was there was one night, I don't know why, the two of them, my 2 children, keep crying. And my mom, I already told my mom, it's very late, please go home. And that night, I don't know why, it was shortly after my husband left for Saudi. The two of them just wouldn't stop crying. And because I also wanted my helper to rest so that, at some place, because I'm really quite familiar in the bedroom, so I had the two of them with me. But for whatever reason, I don't know why, that night they would not stop crying. And I was asking myself, what is going on? Like, why are you crying? Like the 2-year-old is crying for no reason. He's fat, he's clean, he's
Could he
ready for bed.
comprehend that mommy is blind and cannot see? Or was he like still expecting you to be able to attend to his daily needs?
He was still expecting that.
Yeah, so I think that
he went through a lot. I think my elder boy went through a lot because there was separation anxiety with the father, and then there is mommy who could not attend to him, and then there's a younger brother who is stealing his attention, right? In many ways, but that night really inched in my memory till now, and as I'm telling you, I can still feel it in my body. So I have on one hand the 2-year-old I'm trying to soothe him to stop crying. I have that newborn that wailing and wailing away. I'm like, why is this happening? When is this? I think the question there was, when is this going to stop?
Was there that question also, like, what if I'm blind forever, right? When am I going to get my eyesight back? Because you really have no idea of what's going to be happening, right, in the future. And how did you go through that? I think that's something that definitely we can learn a lot from.
The answer was very unknown. Even the eye specialist could not promise. And then I asked the statistics, and I think the eye specialist didn't want to tell me, but I pressed on. They said, for women who has gone through childbirth, severe eclampsia, who lost their eyesight, only 33% will have full recovery. Most of them has half or slight. So if you ask me, I depended on my faith quite a lot, and I think it was very much that no matter what is it, I need to give my best to my 2 boys. No matter what is it could be half blindness, full blindness. I still need to give my boys the very best of me and the very best of why. I mean, they didn't ask to come into this world. I brought them into this world, so it's my responsibility. I think it's pros and cons. responsibility is my first superpower, or not a superpower. I held on to that, and I think it brought me out from that I'm doomed to, no matter what is it, I want to give my boys the best. And even if I'm blind, I will be the best mom that I can be.
Cassandra, you had your mom and your helper helping you, the two kids. But what I'm not hearing is who was taking care of you.
She was taking care of herself.
Yeah, was it just you taking care of yourself all the way? Like, was no one helping you? What was the
Good
arrangement?
It's quite interesting, Dawn, because I don't know how it works. I think God has really marvelous blessings upon people who lose something, who lose one senses. So when you lose one sense, your other sensory becomes more acute and more sensitive. So I could hear a lot better. So when my children cry, it was really deafening, right? And I'm a lot more sensitive with my sense of touch. And because we were living in the household, in the home that we have been living quite a while, so, and because they padded it well, so I could move around quite easily.
So you establish your own routine and
Yes.
a way of
Yes.
navigating with your other senses, even though you could not see.
Yes, and because we in some ways renovated that house for children, because that was our marital home, right? So we actually had very little furniture than the essentials one. So we don't have a coffee table because my first child was a boy, so he
They would
actually
bump
played.
into it.
Or
and-
climbing all over the place.
Yeah, so he actually can play soccer in the living room. That's how spacious is it, and that's how little furniture we had. So in some ways, that was not the major concern. I think what was the major was dealing with the emotions, dealing with the postnatal blue, dealing with what's next.
Everything happening at the same time, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, how long did it take for you to get used to the new life without that sense of sight?
Honestly, Alex, I couldn't tell you no, because it was not a question that you asked then, because you're in it. It's like you're in the rut. All you need, if you ask me, all I remember is, how do I get to the next day? How do I get to the next day? How do I get to the next day? And I remember one of the goals that I set is that my preemie must put on weight, because my mom is like, oh my God, you look at him. So
Yeah.
if you ask me, one of the things that I learned to get out of any adversity is to have a small goal, and a goal that is outside of yourself.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing also, right? What I'm hearing is put others before self.
Yeah.
And with that goal or that objective, then because you're not so important, that somebody else or something else is more important. And eventually you get by, which is why you don't even know how long it took for everything to happen.
Yeah. So our so-called milestone is always Gadia's check with the pediatrician. So he's passed through this test, he has gained weight, then we celebrate. Right. So that was the milestone that always had me looking forward to. But things got a little bit challenging because every 3 months my husband would come back from Saudi, and because he comes back, right, and then my elder one is quite familiar with him. So then he would have to leave for work after 1 week or so.
Right.
So
And then you have to deal with the separation anxiety.
I have to deal with the
again.
separation anxiety. And on top of blindness, on top of everything, our marriage got into a bit of issue because you have so much of pent up anger.
Yeah.
You have so much of pent up questioning, like what's going on. And in some ways, as a woman, it's like, you got me pregnant, then, you leave me. Logically, I understand, but the emotional part of, after so much of
Yeah.
trauma and everything, you just couldn't get logical when, you're dealing with.
It's like logically, you both knew that none of you guys were at fault, and you were each doing what you needed to do for the family, for the household. But emotionally, you would be like, why aren't you there for me? Why other
Exactly.
husbands are around and you're not, right? Yeah, it's always that dilemma.
Yeah, it's painful, and to deal with Rehan every time when my husband goes back to Saudi, it was challenging. It's Papa. So it was like, okay, after a while, I said, why don't you not come back? And I think it really caused a huge damage in.
Yeah, because that must have been very hurtful for him to hear.
Yes.
It's like, you know, you
Yes.
don't want to see me.
Yes.
I mean, as a
Yeah.
As
husband,
husband,
right?
right?
As a father, I
Yes.
would want to come back and see my child.
Yes.
And obviously to see my wife as well. But
Exactly.
yeah, wow, must have been
It was
difficult.
very, very, very
Yeah.
painful. So, wow. I mean, it was very, very, very difficult. It was very difficult. And it was until when Gadia was almost 9 months. Because when he was in Saudi, he wanted all of us to go over so that he can better take care of us. But at that point in time, that was 2009, right? Women aren't allowed to drive. You have to be accompanied by a male before you could go out. So all those restrictions got me to say, no, there's no way I'm going to go to Saudi with you, with the 2 boys. And I'm very attached to my mom because, my mom, seriously, she was the pillar of support. My mom is a very strong woman and she said, you know what? We're going to go through this. You're going to get better. The boys will be well taken care of. So she keeps reminding me of that. And I say, yeah. So a lot of the emotional support was from my mom, and I couldn't imagine not having her with me because there's no way she will move overseas with me. I said, no Saudi. And then he checked in with his company and there was a position open in Dubai. So by then, about 6 months or so, I could start seeing lines. I could start seeing lines like, what I see
And
is
there's light.
there's lines coming in. So according to the eye specialist, it's a good sign. It's slow, it's a good sign. But because for me, I never quite like to rely on medicine. I feel that, it's quite detrimental to your health. So I started exploring taking supplements of different sort. When people recommend it, I say, okay, let's try.
And it was at the 6-month mark.
Yes. So I started taking supplements and I think that helped. So it hastened the recovery. So by the 9th month, when my husband got a position in Dubai, I could see a bit of things already. Like, I could see a frame and
But
blur, but there's movement. I could see movement, which is a huge step forward in terms of recovery. So
I
it's
want to backtrack a little bit,
Sure.
right? You talk about how, what I could hear from your story is you made your home a safe haven for you. And that's where like your mom came through, your helper came through, your other sides became more magnified, and you were able to still feel safe enough in your own home even though you didn't have your sight.
Yes.
But what about outside of home? Surely you would have had to go out in those 6 months, right? How did you navigate that?
Actually, no.
Also, you stayed home throughout
we
the whole
tried
6
not
months.
to go out as much as possible because it's not convenient. Like steps and all this is
Yeah,
it's so
exactly.
dangerous. And plus, you have 2 young children, you have to, push the trolley. So we try as much
But this
as
was in 2009. I don't think the food deliveries apps were up
Oh,
yet.
no. That's why the helper and mom.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
and I have a bit of support from some friends who came over to spend time with me.
I think support structures definitely
Yeah.
must have been what kept you
Yeah.
together. Your mom.
Oh,
I mean,
definitely.
we would love to
I-
have your mom on the show as well.
Yeah, I mean,
next
without my
round.
mom, I would not be sitting here.
And your
because-
helper, is she still with you?
Oh no, the helper went back to Philippines after we went to Dubai.
Right.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Okay.
so we went to Dubai and then
At the 9 month.
yeah, when Katie was 9 months old. And by then, I think it was very much, okay, now that we're in a new environment, so everything start all over again. So handling 2 children in a brand new environment, and plus, Dubai is a desert.
Yep.
Oh gosh. They were sick for the first 3 months non-stop.
New
Because of the
environment
dry-
adjustments.
the
Because
dryness and the
there's
heat.
fine sand going in and you can't
Right.
tell. Those days we don't wear masks, right? And you don't know. And they were perpetually in aircon because it was very, very hot. So all this adjustment. So the first 3 months I was like, oh, I think I cannot make it. I want to go back to Singapore. I was thinking,
Wait, so you moved over and you were taking care of 2 kids who kept falling sick, and you didn't have your helper or mom this time, and yet your sight was not fully back.
Was
right?
it 80%, you would say, or 70% back?
I think it was about 60 to 70. The doctor was saying
So
that.
let's say if we look at the frame behind us, for instance, you can see the shape. You
Yeah.
can see that there's something there, but you don't know what it is.
I could roughly tell because how do I explain to you? So because of not the full recovery, right? So the shades will come in different, not like what we see now. Like now it's flat, right? So when you're recovering from such eye condition, it moves. So it's not
Right.
stable.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So I mean, because I've been alive for quite some time, I mean, roughly I can tell, but it doesn't stay. So it moves.
It's almost like the cornea is moving.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Right,
Because what happens was that
right.
when I gave birth to Gadia, I pushed.
Mm.
So the retina was pushed, both retina was pushed out. So it was not attached back anymore. So
So
it moves.
slowly adjusting
Yeah, so
back.
so the recovery was to let the retina be attached back again.
Right.
Right.
But what about when you had to bring the kids to the doctor when they were sick in those 3 months?
No, my husband. So he told his company, my wife has a condition, we're bringing up too. So can you be a bit more flexible? And his then employer was very, very understanding and
That's
wanted him to
good.
be there in the job. So in some ways,
Hey, I hope you're enjoying Wise and Shine so far. I'm your host Reggie, aka your chief financial coconut, and for us to continue to do this show so that you become a tad bit wiser every week, you gotta like, share, subscribe, help us beat the algorithm. But even more importantly, if you can, comment in the comment section below. Let us know your thoughts and also some questions that you would love us to answer. Yep, now back to the show.
actually, I want to try back a little bit. Just now I didn't say this. I forgot about this. You know, people say that it's a misfortune to lose both your eyes after giving birth. But I feel blessed because even though after I give birth, I push both of my retina out of my sight, I'm still alive because in most conditions, the woman who give birth naturally with severe eclampsia, who would have died.
Oh dear.
So the death rate is actually very, very high. The death rate is higher than losing your sight and any other condition. So if you ask me, then I didn't know, but after I recover, I researched on it. I realized, wow, God must be giving me a second chance. So I better make good use of this chance.
Thank God for that. I actually
Wow.
want to also know, right, when the sight came back, what were the feelings and emotions? Because we've been talking a lot about the frustration, the sadness, but let's talk a little bit about the positives, right? So when that sight came back, when you could see lines, what were you feeling? And prior to this, it was always, priority is taking care of my kids. But now that you know that, hey, things are going well for me, was there at any point where you were thinking, yes, what next for me?
I think at the point in time, I was looking at, okay, now, I can see once again, hopefully full. Would I be able to see my children, still my children, till they grow up? And I wanted to really, in some ways, work on our marriage because our marriage was really quite torn. I would burst into temper and I would, fight with him. And thankfully, my husband is quite a mellowed man and he took it in. But no matter what, for 3 years continuously going through day in, days out, this type of relationship, it needs healing. It really needs healing. So I asked myself at a point in time, what sort of marriage do I want? If I want a positive up, I would say a marriage till we both breathe our last breath, then I need to work on it. Then I need to go through maybe therapies or need to see someone and we need to do it together. And also I look at my children and I said they deserve, right? Loving parents, not just towards them, but towards one another because they are role models. I mean, I hope that, they will get married, they will have their spouse and we need to be the role models. And also in our religion, it's very important to be respectful to one another in terms of a marriage. And I think what really, truly, truly helped, I'll be honest, is I met someone in Dubai. So even though you see me wearing a hijab, I only started wearing my hijab 2 years ago. And I became a Muslim before I married my husband, but I wasn't practicing much. But in Dubai, I met this wonderful, wonderful Muslim woman. She's much younger than me, and she only specialized in teaching new reverts, which is people who are learning or who have converted to Islam. I team myself as that because I didn't really learn the religion or practice the religion. So when I met her, things started to change. because I started learning about Islam and the fundamentals and the principles of Islam, which is about love, which is about, in some ways, loving not only yourself, but people around you and seeing it in a more inclusive way, not as in, it's about me, 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 me. So that helped. And it was at the back. It was not fronting me, it was at the back. And things would then change very quietly, right? How I see my husband, how I see my children, how I see this journey, especially at that point in time when we were spending 2 years in Dubai. My side has by then fully recovered. And I asked myself, so am I going to be a stay-at-home mom forever? And how can I contribute to my family, as well as how can I, in some ways, be with my mom and my dad, because by then they were, still in Singapore and we were in Dubai, and they would always call. There were times they came to visit, but because of the weather, they always fall sick. So I was like, Mom, Dad, you know what? Let us come back to Singapore instead of you coming to Dubai, because it's just not so good for their health. So at the point in time, it was very much, okay, so who am I? How should I be serving, not only about myself, but my family, my parents? And at the point in time, my husband was doing quite well, so I don't really need to get a job, or I don't need to contribute to the family financially. But it was very much, so who am I?
Was that also how you came into this new career that you founded Comb, or was Comb somewhere later?
Oh, somewhere later. It was somewhere later. So after Dubai, it's not a transfer, it's a new company for my husband, and we went back to KL, which was my husband's hometown. My husband is a Malaysian, so at the point in time, my father-in-law was quite sick. And for my husband, he has always been working outside of Malaysia, and we didn't want to have any regrets. After what we went through, we really didn't want to have any regrets. So we went back to KL and we stayed there for 2 years. And it was then that our marriage really healed. It's almost like suddenly things just settled. And that anger was completely gone. I don't know how, but it was just settled. And I take a look at him, and I remember one day I said, I seriously, I don't know how to thank you, because you accepted me and you took out all of my anger, all of my rubbish for the last 3 years, and you didn't say no to the marriage. You bear it all. You know what I mean? For a man to bear all the woman's temper and to take on the responsibility of taking care of your 2 young children, and to still find, to manage it financially, it's not easy. I always say this, I say everybody likes to interview me or talk about me. I think people should interview him. How he went through all this.
We'd love to have you on the podcast next
Another
time.
perspective. as well.
Yeah. So in KL, we kind of like settled. And because he was closer to his family, he has a huge family. We were invited to a lot of family gatherings. Muslim and Malays, they like to do that. And my boys had a lot of cousins to play with. And by then, Gadia got out of so-called, they have the lowest 10%, whatever. And anytime you go to the doctor, they always say, oh, your son is, it's very, I don't know. I wish they could change their communication. Instead of always telling you the negative news, like tell you something of the positive news. So by then, when we went to KL, his health was already stable.
Okay.
Right? Because for a preemie, they always would say certain things would not develop. If not developed by a certain time, So that whole milestone was something that me and my husband was, okay, finally. So he's going to be normal. Other than he will likely forever be very skinny. So they warn us, he will never be of the normal weight. But in terms of neuro development, motoring, cognitive, everything, he's
track.
normal.
How old is your second one now?
My second one now, he's 15.
Teenagers already, yeah. So your other boy must be
17.
in army? Oh, not yet.
Not
almost.
yet, yeah. So 17 and 15.
15. And he really is skinny, like what the doctors predicted.
Tall and skinny. Tall and skinny. To me, our KPIs for him is always healthy. right? It doesn't matter, whatever it is, as long as he's healthy, because he has that history, right, of being a preemie. So it was very tough. And after we settle in KL, so the next question is they are going to enter primary school, right? So the next question, big question was, okay, so is it KL, international school, or back to Singapore, which is, government school? Because both our boys are Singapore citizens. So we naturally could come back. But my husband is like, we are already in KL, But at the point in time, I don't know whether you remember, those days, there was a lot of kidnapping happening in KL with kids. And my mom, my two children are her only grandchildren. So
And your mom was still in Singapore?
Yes, was still in Singapore. But because we hadn't had our PR then, so we have to come back every 30 days to do our stamp, right? Our ICA stamp. So we always come back to see her, and she's always like, oh, you know what, you have to be very careful. Your two boys are very cute. They want to kidnap. So I said, Mom, stop. It's just so stressful. And for me, I don't like to drive in traffic jam, but in KL, if you don't drive, you can't get anywhere. So I was driving, and I was telling my husband, I don't think I can handle this anymore. Every morning at 6, I have to dash the boys to their kindergarten and everything. I say, can we come back to Singapore? But he was a bit adamant, because he said, I'm with my family, we have support system here. I guess he couldn't understand, for a wife, for a female, being close to mom is important. So anyway, so this is a trick I must tell all the audience. If you want to tell your spouse something, don't tell him or her yourself. Get the best friend. So I was convincing him for 6 months, and he kept saying no. Then after that, he went out kopi or teh tarik with one of his friends, who is also a Malaysian. He was telling me, my wife keep wanting to go back to Singapore. I don't understand. Then friend looked at him and said, are you crazy? You know how many Malaysians want to send their kids to Singapore to study, and your children are Singapore citizens, and you pay $6.50 or whatever for their primary school, and we pay hundreds of dollars, and you are arguing with your wife? Are you crazy? The moment he come home, we are going back to Singapore.
Sometimes it takes other people to
I
tell
think the
us
third
that,
party before it sinks
I
in,
know,
right?
I have to
right?
follow
And then
too,
after that,
yeah.
it's breeze. Then it's like, okay, what school, blah, blah, blah. So we got all that handled. And we came back in 2014, 4 days before Rehan started primary 1, and 5 days before Gadia started kindergarten.
Wow.
And you still had your flat,
Yes,
your
yes,
house.
we still had.
Yeah.
We just rented it out.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, so we were
Okay.
thank God for that far side. So we moved back in, but he didn't had his job in Singapore yet, so he couldn't find a job in Singapore yet. So, but we moved back. So 3 of us moved back. So he became a weekend daddy. So
Right.
every other weekend he would drive back to Singapore to be with the family. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit,
Sure.
because Wise and Shine, as you guys know, it's a personal development and also career growth. We're all about helping you lead your best life. And I just wanted to call out some moments in your journey that really made me realize some of the, overarching wisdoms or themes that everyone can learn from. And it's things that are not just in your life, but also in one's career. So the first one would be, at the point where all of that was happening, all the bad things, I realized you never kept, sometimes when we hear people reiterate their story, right? The common message they always say is, I was asking, why me? Why me? But with your version of the tale, I realized you were all about focusing on someone else, something else. And that really made me remember this quote I've read before, where focus on the things that you can control. And not on those that you cannot. In your story, there were so many things that were out of your control. Your sight, your husband being away, all of the things that were happening, your preemie's health, what the doctors were saying, your emotions. But you focused on the one thing you could control was, is my preemie gaining weight? And are both my boys healthy and alive? That's it. And that focus then became central, because I was hearing that a lot when you were sharing your story, to help you get through that first 9 months, which was very difficult. And also the lack of control over your sight, because I think maybe it's a Singaporean thing, or maybe it's just me, I'm a type A. I like to have answers. When there are no answers, I get very frustrated, and that affects everything else. I can out-function. But for you, you had no answers as to what was happening, when your sight would come back, but you just really focused on your 2 boys and your preemie. And I thought that was a lovely message. When we bring that back to the workforce, in today's climate, for instance, a lot of people are being laid off. And I can imagine there's a lot of frustration, right? Because first we heard about the tech layoffs and retrenchments, and companies were justifying it by saying we have no budget, we foresee a recession or a downturn, we have to cut back on our spending and be more cost efficient. And then suddenly they got budget to spend on AI. So if you're one of those who were laid off, I can imagine people will be like, why me? You say you have no money and now you have money for budget. So where did the no money and money drop down from the sky kind of questions, right? But all of that really are out of our control. Someone can't control what their boss, their employer says or does. They can't control if they are laid off today or tomorrow, or maybe you're capped, but then tomorrow a new technology could come out that would make you completely redundant. But focusing, using your life experience and lesson, focusing on what they can control, which was in your case, you talk about the other senses. I could imagine I can relate to in the career, focusing on your other skills.
Yes.
How would you marry these two concepts together? Have you done anything similar for your clients whereby you help them to, when they lose sight of something, they lose control of one thing, to amplify the others to help them get to that next stage?
I like that analogy actually, losing sight of something at work.
Yeah.
What else do you want to be looking at? We're all ears to hear what you have to say.
I think what's very important is know that this is not the end. Just remember that this is not the end. I think with every career crisis or workforce crisis, there is always something else. Knowing that this is not it helps you to have a bigger outlook about what's really going on. So I always advise my clients, especially teams or organizations, to look at what truly is this about. Is it calling for you to shift, or is it calling for you to then take a back seat and say, okay, what's next? Because if you have a very near view of what's going on, you just see this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for someone who lost sight, I could tell. You just take a back seat and then you see a bigger picture. And we do this somatically with clients. We actually coach clients to actually sit back or lie down so that you have a different optical view of what's going on. And I think what's very, very important is use that opportunity to develop something else that if you are in employment, you can't. You're always busy chasing numbers or, doing your work. So now use it as an opportunity to develop something that you want to develop and never could develop. And you brought into the picture AI, Dawn. I personally feel, and with some research that we've done, with more technology and AI, actually the trust in human being actually decreases because there's a lot of uncertainty and unknown.
Yes.
And this is the best time for human beings to learn to build trust within yourself and within others. So not too long ago, I wrote a post on LinkedIn about, they call it soft skills, right? Things like collaboration, things like, effective communication, things like humility, empathy, right? All these soft skills. But to me, they are essential skills. With technology advancing so fast, with AI advancing so fast, and we haven't even have standards or policies governing them, you begin to see, what's going to happen to myself, right? In terms of my job, in terms of my role in organizations. That's why you need to strengthen yourself. Strengthen yourself in terms of certainty, strengthen yourself in terms of stability, and strengthen yourself in terms of confidence. And how do you do that? Is to build trust. Learn to gain trust with yourself. And how do you do that? Getting to know yourself better. Not just the logical part, but the emotional as well as what I call the survivor brain. What's your limiting beliefs about yourself? What's your values? And those are the things that will hold through. When all else fails, those are the things that will hold through. And I always tell teams when they are supposed to perform better, look at essentially what's the missing quotient, which usually from most of our work with clients is psychological safety. Because when you don't have psychological safety, it stems from trust.
Yeah.
Right? I don't trust you. So why should I share resources with you? What should I be telling you about my budget? Right? And because of that, a lot of teams start working in silo. And when they work in silo, who lose? Organizations lose. The teams lose. So with that, I always say, look at this really objectively. And of course, right, like what I went through, you have emotions and things like that. Let it come. I'm not saying suppress it, but at the same time seek modalities or seek steps to allow all this pent up to be released naturally, or speak to someone who can help you, and then look at it objectively. And that's where I always say a mentor, a coach who has gone through such journeys or who have gone through similar things can help you, because then they likely can bring you down and ground you. Because when we act out of logical is where I call illogical, emotional. And when you're doing anything or when you make decisions out of emotions, usually not
Yeah, we
most
usually end up
desirable,
regretting
right?
them later
Yeah,
on.
then we'll regret them. So
Exactly.
grounding yourself in really taking stock of what's going on. I always say this: we only choose to see adversity as adversity if we allow ourselves to. If not, it could be a turning point. It could be an opportunity. So recently, some people ask, so don't you look back and say, why me? I say, yes, I know now why me, because I am supposed to learn some lessons from it. And because of those lessons and those adversities, I'm a much better person today. You ask me, I truly love who I am now. Of course, there are things I need to improve and change. I'm not saying this out of arrogance, but if you compare me to when it happened, I'm so much more empathetic person. I'm so much more a compassionate person. I'm so much more willing to serve others and to contribute to others than I was then. Because I went through it, I know how challenging. And in the world that we live in right now with the war and geographical, political issues, I think that's what is important.
I think one question that our listeners would probably want to know as well is, so we need to build that self, right? What we're hearing is we need to have that self-awareness first before there can be organizational change or organizational transformation. But we also talked about the tangibles, which is sight, right? And using that analogy on what we might lose sight of and applying to the other four senses. But something that's intangible is something like emotions.
Yes.
So that question, I guess, that people might ask would be, how do I work on my emotions? Where do we start? I mean, perhaps we could end with certain strategies on as a self. I don't know. I'm always blowing my top. I'm always getting upset with what people say about me, even though it's not directed at me. How do I work on all of these things first as a self before then we can take that next step, whether it's a coach or whether it's a mentor?
I think I always recommend the 2 A's. First, awareness, right? You be aware. That means something is happening to you all the time. And in some ways, you want to notice that this is not productive or positive for you, right? After that awareness, then next is acceptance. I'm willing to accept that this is not good for me. Then what actions do I want to take? With that too, then the person will be focusing on something I can do rather than it's me. Why is it me? Why is this person always attacking me? Or why is it always me? So awareness, acceptance. With the acceptance is always action forward. What can I do? Then the person can strategize whether I want to look for a coach, a therapist, or whatever. But then remember I said about my adversity is outside of me. It's never about me. Because once you retain it in me, it becomes like a loop. You remember, you know, right? It goes round and round. Why me, how me, whatever. But once you move it out, it becomes actionable. Right? And then if the person is a lot more aware, and if the person who is working with him or her can then relate to a small goal, that loop will always, I've never seen it fail, right? Set a goal outside of the person, a small goal. Usually someone he or she cares about, it usually beautifully works.
I love it. Yeah. Okay, so we have this thing at the end of every episode where we go in a round table to wrap up our biggest takeaways. I'll start first. I love what you said, and I could sum that up for our readers and the listeners. The 3A framework, right? When you encounter adversity, you then start to be aware of it, and then you put forward what is your action forward. So adversity, awareness, and action forward. That was the biggest 3 takeaways I got from your sharing. Thank you so much, Cassandra.
Thank you, Dawn.
Alex, what about you? Oh, you're also an A.
I have one more A there. But I think I'll add on to that, right? So adversity, awareness, and action. But what I am taking away as well is that you need not have adversity to actually have that awareness and acceptance. Because some people might say, hey, I got no challenges in my life. Does that mean that I cannot move forward? Does that mean that I cannot have that emotional maturity? Right? It doesn't matter. As long as we have that awareness, we know that there's something that we want to work on. And then we have those actionable items and then we set those goals. Right? So you don't need to have adversity before you can have that growth and emotional maturity.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cassandra.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Dom.
Cassandra.
Thank you.
And that's for today's episode. It was a little heavy, but we hope that you have learned a lot from Cassandra Nadira Lee life story. I certainly have.
So did I, definitely.
Exactly. So with all these frameworks in place, we hope that you guys will find this episode useful in your week today or your life moving forward, be it applying them to your life, your relationships, or even your career. And if you want to find out more about the work that Cassandra Nadira Lee does, where can they find you?
Or they can always search out for www.comb, C-O-M-B, remember the comb that you comb your hair, .sg.
And there you have it. Thank you so much, Cassandra. And
Thank
thank you
you.
guys for tuning in. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.